Hello, everyone. Welcome in to a late night edition of the Full Court Trap Pod. Luke Tackett coming at you here with Blake Smith. Blake, we had to get on and do an emergency reaction because we just witnessed another insane game with the Kentucky Wildcats going into Knoxville and taking down the number 8 Volunteers. After that 2-game skid they went on there against Bama and Vanderbilt, they needed this one bad, and we see the Traps representing the brand
Yeah,
tonight. This is
gotta
basically the
rock the
Big Blue
boys.
Trap. Big Blue Trap tonight, baby. CATS. Anyway, before I get off on a homer rant here, I want to talk about this game just from an overall viewpoint. I mean, this was a hell of a game, Blake. Two great teams going at it. And for Kentucky to come out here and pull this result, down Lamont Butler, who's kind of the floor general for that squad, down Andrew Carr, essentially. He got minutes sparingly, but he's still dealing with some back problems. Other guys stepped up in huge spots for them. Role players that we're not used to seeing. Trent Noah made big shots. Colin Chandler, he was serviceable. I mean, you're not going to see his impact on the box score. And then the guys like Kobe Brea, Amari Williams, Jackson Robinson, Otega Oweh, the guys you expect to do their thing, did their thing tonight. And they came out with what I think might be the best win Mark Pope has under his resume this year.
Yeah, I definitely think the same way you do. This is an unbelievable win on just a random Tuesday. Like, this is what college basketball gets you. Random Tuesday at the end of January, two top 15 teams going head to head in a crazy environment. Like, you can't ask for much more. Uh, that's unbelievable performance by the Wildcats, and to come out in the second half when their back was against the wall after going down by 3, and all the momentum was shifted towards the Vols at the end of that first half. It's just unbelievable coaching job by Pope, I feel like, and unbelievable way to respond by the team. Jackson Robinson played a heck of a role as a point guard tonight when the team needed a point guard, really, because Lamont being out, and he's been their primary ball handler and playmaker all year. So it's unbelievable to watch him do what he did tonight. Amari, I mean, there were some struggles there sparingly over the game. Rebounding wise, not even on him, but he ended up finishing with 15 boards, 10 points. Heck of a night for him. 4 assists as well. Kobe Brea, I mean, the dude didn't miss at all. Like,
Did not
they don't call him
miss.
Fuego for no reason. And Trent Noah, like you said, he put up some good minutes for a guy who's not really played a whole lot of meaningful minutes until recently with injuries and whatnot. And then last but not least, you got to give the props to Colin Chandler. This is a guy who struggled big time all season long. Uh, he's not really like providing much off the bench for them. But this is a guy who was highly touted in the 2022 class, and now he's able to show off his talent basically and potential that he has. And this is a guy that's also coming off a mission trip, like was gone for 2 years literally. So him putting on a defensive clinic like he did against a really, really good Tennessee team that's gonna be a Final Four contender, it just like you can't say enough about his effort tonight.
Yeah, no, and I mean, for Tennessee, in their first 3 matchups, I just pulled this stat off Twitter. They held their opponents to an average of 54.7 points per game. Kentucky goes into their building down a couple of key guys and puts up 78. I mean, that is a hell of a stat there if you're Mark Pope's group to speak to what this team's capable of when the offense is humming. And for Tennessee, I want to kind of focus on them here for a minute. This is back-to-back games where the offense has really struggled. I mean, shooting-wise tonight, Igor Milicic had a hell of a game. He really impressed me tonight with his ability to stretch the floor and get rebounds and be physical as well. But outside of that, I mean, Zakai Ziegler put up a stinker. Chaz Lanier, he had moments in the game, a little heat check there at the end. It cut the lead down to about 1 for Kentucky and forced them to kind of respond. But other than that, he really was kept in check. And, I mean, we talked about it in the preview that you missed out on. It felt like for Kentucky, if they wanted to win this game, they had to kind of dictate the pace, and not let Tennessee get into that flow that they like to run where they're just really physical and blowing up screens and defensive tenacity. But really, it felt like Tennessee did kind of dictate the pace of this game, and Kentucky simply was just better tonight, which really impresses me.
Yeah, that's something we really haven't seen a whole lot of too for Kentucky. So I mean, it's kind of wild to see them go into Tennessee in a ridiculous environment, one of the better environments in all of college basketball for big, big like prime time games. So I mean, what they're able to do tonight and that environment, let it like just itself was crazy to watch.
Yeah, and the response from this group too as well, because they didn't go through a ton of adversity in this game. Kentucky really, it felt like they were kind of in control for a majority of it, but towards halftime, it did get a little bit sketchy there because Tennessee went on that 11-0 run. They took the 3-point lead coming into halftime, and when you're down a couple of guys, you're in a hostile environment like that. That easily a team could fold under that pressure, but I think that this kind of result is very encouraging if you're a Kentucky fan. I mean, obviously, I'm a Kentucky fan, and I'm psyched out of my mind about this win with the way they just performed because I think that teams that are built for long term success, they go and find ways to win those kind of games and those kind of environments when things seem like they're not trending your way, going in down a couple of men, and then at halftime, obviously didn't end the way you wanted to. But I want to talk more specifically about Tennessee before we give Kentucky their flowers some more. I've alluded to them having their offensive struggles. This is back-to-back games now. I mean, I don't even remember the shooting percentages from the Auburn one, but it wasn't pretty. And then tonight they put up 34% from the field, 24% from three. I mentioned Igor really being the only guy to step up for them. Yeah, are we starting to get a little bit concerned here about Tennessee's offensive abilities? Because this is starting to become a trend where if they're having a good night and they can beat anybody in the country with the mix of the guys like Chaz and Zakai and Igor when they're on their A game, but when some of those guys are off, it's going to be hard for them to win just strictly by bullying their opponents and enforcing their will on defense, at least in my opinion.
Offensively, worry right now. Granted, they are playing some of the better teams in the best conference in all of basketball right now. But I mean, when they're putting up stinker performances, you're not just gonna win a single regular season game with just your defense. I feel like in this league this year, especially not when uh, Kentucky in this game is shooting lights out from the field. I think it was like 50% from both sides, from three and from the field tonight. So, I mean, you just can't win a game against a high power offense with just your defense. That kind of was not up to par tonight. I think 78 points for Kentucky is the most Tennessee's allowed this season, too.
Yeah, that sounds right because I believe going into this game, there was some stat out there. It was pretty crazy how they've held a majority of teams to under about 70. I don't think they've really
Hmm.
given up too many points this year. So obviously, the defense isn't in question at all when it comes to this group. I just worry about this team and their shot creators because, I mean, there's Chaz and Igor, like I mentioned, but beyond that, it's kind of hard to see where you're going to get that from. Zakai Ziegler, he's a phenomenal playmaker. He can get to the basket at will as well. He's a little bit undersized, but he also had an injury scare in this game too. So I will note that we're glad he avoided anything serious there. But maybe he was hindered a little bit by that with his bad performance because obviously it looked pretty bad going into halftime. I mean, Rick Barnes said that he was genuinely concerned, but this Tennessee team, they're not getting a break. I mean, nobody gets a break in the SEC because they got to bring a Florida team that 30 balled them a couple weeks back, and they're coming into Knoxville this weekend. So they got to get up off the mat quick and respond. And I have a feeling that they will. But at the same time, I feel like these offensive concerns just piling up and building up. It's definitely something to worry about with this group. But Blake, Kentucky, they now lead the country with 7 top 25 net wins this year. Mark Pope is 6-1 against top 15 opponents. There's been all kinds of wins on this podcast that we've talked about. We've covered the whole season thus far. You think this is the most impressive of them all? Because I think there's definitely an argument for it being one of the most impressive.
Without a doubt, honestly, like this Tennessee team, their defense is ranked, I don't know exactly right now in defensive efficiency, but I know for a fact they're like, I think top 15, top 10 in the country. Obviously, Duke's got a top two, top three defense in the country, but that was like they played Duke before they really hit their strides, if I would say.
Hmm.
So to go on the road in this environment against a really, really good defensive team that plays really hard nosed, and to be able to do it without practically three key guys on your team. Kerr Kriisa, he's been out for a majority of the season. Lamont Butler out because of the shoulder injury, and then practically you add in Andrew Carr being out because, I mean, let's face it, he played in like 2 minutes tonight and they kind of just shoved him on the bench and just kind of hid him basically for the rest of the night. So to get this win in this environment, I've said that like 20 times this episode, but I mean it like that's the best way to describe it. That's like it's an unbelievable win, honestly. It's hard to fathom how big of a win it really is for a team that just went to Vanderbilt and basically choked that game.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, when you look at the wins, obviously, like I was mentioning, I think on paper everybody would say, well, obviously, Duke's the most impressive there. Duke looks like a legit national title favorite with Auburn right now. But at the same time, you also kind of have to factor in that was in November. Duke really has started to hit their stride around early January, the end of December, and all the way through now. They had their scare last night against NC State, but I mean, they found a way to win, and great teams find a way to take those games. But I definitely think that this one is probably the most impressive, and I'd say a close second would be going into Mississippi State and winning in that environment as well in a shootout because they just outscored an elite Mississippi State team. So there's definitely a resume here that is one of the best in the country. I'd say there's not too many teams out there whose resumes really compare against Kentucky besides probably Auburn. I'd say
Hmm.
Auburn has by far the best resume in the country, but now they look ahead to the homecoming with Cal. We're going to have that video posted up here in a couple of days. That's obviously going to be a big one. But I mentioned Tennessee's got Florida coming into Knoxville. Do you think that the Vols get right in that spot, or is it going to be another tough challenge? Because we saw what Florida did to them a couple weeks ago.
Oh, it's definitely going to be a tough challenge, but I think uh, the Volunteers can overcome the adversity and lock in on the defensive end a little more than they were tonight. Obviously, Florida's an insanely high shooting percentage team and has been like lights out all season long, but I do think the Volunteers can pull it off.
Yeah, I definitely am on board with that one. And
And I
last thing
think
before, oh, go ahead.
sorry to cut
No,
you
you're
off,
good.
but I think this is a game where Chaz Lanier really has to step it up. He made a few key shots down the stretch in the second half tonight, but I mean, you still got to get a little more. And he hit the one right before the first half ended too. But this is a
Yeah,
guy that you're paying a buttload of money for to basically be the Dalton Connect replacement guy, and we've talked about that tit or tad bit a few times on this podcast, but like he really has to step it up in that Florida game. This is a team that's not gonna come in there and just hand them a win. This is a team that's going to be physical and they're going to shoot lights out. So uh, Chaz Lanier's got to match that and just ball out. Zakai Ziegler, uh, really inconsistent tonight. He's another guy that has to really step it up going into that Florida game because Walter Clayton, he's going to be another tough matchup, just like how Jackson Robinson was tonight.
yeah, and you actually led perfectly into what I was thinking about. So Chaz Lanier and Jackson Robinson, these were two guys that both Kentucky were looking at in the offseason in the portal. And I mean, Jackson Robinson, let's just be straight up here, folks. He won that matchup outright between those two guys. And he just went in there and put up numbers that you like to see from him if you're a Kentucky fan. That's the Jackson Robinson that they need if they're going to have success. And on the other side there for Chaz, you got to be hoping for better for him coming up because there's a lot of expectations that have been put on him, like you mentioned, him being kind of put in that Dalton Connect replacement profile type of thing, and he just didn't really deliver tonight. But we know what he's capable of. I'll be very interested to see how through the rest of conference play these two guys, the tracks they go on, because of just how they were so closely involved in what Kentucky was trying to build in the portal. But another thing on the Tennessee side of things that I'm a little bit concerned about, Felix Okpara, he got kind of worked by Amari Williams in this game. And I mean, he's averaging 7 and 6 on the year, but I don't think it's a stretch by any means to say that he doesn't really necessarily blow you away as far as big men go. Do you think that might end up being a little bit of a liability for Rick Barnes as you go down the stretch? Because coming off the bench as well, he doesn't really have a guy that can kind of step in and fill that role as effectively as you would like at the 5 spot.
I don't know if I'd call it a liability right now, but I kind of hard to call it a liability because I mean Cade Phillips is still a quality guy.
That's
Who?
really all they have to back him up, to be
Yeah,
honest with you, because I
that's
mean,
true.
you got Gainey, you got Dubar, but those are both guards.
Akpara did have a bad night tonight, but I mean he's
Hmm.
still a solid guy. Like he's still gonna get you a few boards, a block or two, and a handful of points. He did get outworked by Amari tonight, but I mean it happens. It's college basketball. There's crazy shit that happens. Hint,
Yeah,
hint. Arizona, Caleb Love last night, but I mean
man. I wish I was up for that one, man. What an
you
ending!
missed out. You
I
missed
was
out. That
dead
was
as
one of the craziest shots I've ever seen. I went crazy. That's how, what the fuck? Thought I was gonna wake my family up.
Caleb Love. I mean, that man has an uncanny ability to just drop stinkers and then absolutely turn it on in the most random spots. But
Yeah.
that's completely straying away from this game. But on the Felix Okpara side of things, I mean, he kind of feels like he was brought in. You know, they lost Jonas Adu in the portal. He just kind of feels like a budget version of Jonas Adu to me. And I think that if
Yeah.
this Tennessee team would have retained Adu, then they could be even more scary than they are right now. Because Adu, he is being criminally underused at Arkansas. I mean, he's had the injury problems, but at the same
Mhm.
time, I feel like he's not really just fit for Calipari. I don't really know who is fit for Calipari anymore these days, to be quite honest with you. But I just think that that's a loss for Tennessee that they maybe didn't think would be a huge deal. But I mean, Felix Okpara, he's serviceable. I'm not trying to trash
Mhm.
the kid. I just think that maybe at times he might not be that guy that you want at the 5 spot. But if Igor Milicic chips in and plays like he did tonight, then that might be able to get him through against most teams. And I mean, Kentucky was just simply humming offensively tonight, shooting 50% from both the field and three. So honestly, not even much you could do there if you're Tennessee. Just wasn't your night. Kentucky's getting shots to fall, but I do think that it's time we start having some conversations about just how limited this Tennessee team could be because of their offensive just disability at the moment, it seems. But Blake, before we get off of this game, you got any final takeaways on Mark Pope and the Cats pulling this one out on an undermanned squad on the night?
Yeah, this just kind of refers back to an earlier podcast we had. I think it was a few weeks ago actually. It might have been after that Mississippi State game or the A&M game. I don't remember. It was some big win they had, but I do remember I said something about Kentucky being a Final Four type of team, a national championship type of team, and I truthfully still believe that. Sure, they got really high highs, they got really lows, big lows. I mean the Ohio State loss, Clemson is not really a good loss. Vanderbilt, I wouldn't count them a bad loss, but I mean they were unranked at the time, so I mean that's not a good loss. Bama, not a bad loss, but
Mm,
I mean, I still think that like their highs are so good that like it makes me think that they're like a national championship team, especially when their offense is humming. But that's the thing that scares me. If their offense isn't humming and you get an SEC tournament play or March Madness and their offense is off, then they're gonna have to rely on their defense to make some stops, create scoring opportunities in transition, and it's just hard to like see that really happening.
Yeah, I don't like the sound of that. No, I've spoke privately with people about this team. This is easily a team I could see ripping off four straight if they get hot and they go to a Final
Yeah,
Four. But at the same time, if you catch this team on a bad night with the defensive issues they've had, I mean, this could be a team that goes out in round one or round two, and it's just going to be that way the rest of the year, I think, because I don't know if these defensive issues are going to be fixed. I mean, yeah, props for tonight. They held Tennessee to 73, but you definitely have some issues to fix there that are lingering. But Blake, I mean, Kentucky, this was massive for him. He can't deny that at all. Tennessee, they're going to have to regroup quickly because it's not getting any easier for them, like we mentioned. Anything else before we head out of here on the Cats or Tennessee?
really just I'm sticking to my guns. National championship is still in a bird's eye view for them, and then Tennessee. I mean, the same can be said. Honestly, they just got to improve a little more on their offensive end. Chaz Lanier, Ziegler, those two really need to step up going into that Florida game. But I mean, these are still really, really elite teams in college basketball.
Yeah, I got one final thing to say before we head out. Cats, please rebound the basketball. Kobe Bryant, I almost had a heart attack when he let go of that ball, but he just
Uh,
had it in his hands and it slips away. And that
oh,
very, oh,
I'm
what you
sorry to
got?
cut you off. I forgot. We forgot to talk about him as one of our takeaways from the game and giving Kentucky their flowers. Ansley Almanor.
Oh yeah,
We completely forgot. I don't know how I forgot to mention him,
the
but this guy,
ultimate
this is
role
a guy.
player.
He is probably the best role player I've seen at Kentucky in a long time. This guy is like he knows his role. He knows what Pope wants out of him. He fits the scheme like to a T, and he's just absolute money from three whenever he's on. And
And
tonight he
he
was on.
And he wasn't even a role player tonight either. He got put into a spot where he had to play
Yep.
30 minutes, and he goes
Yeah.
in there and he hits four threes, and he did the same thing against Vandy. I mean, his emergence, he came from FDU, obviously. You didn't expect a ton out of him, but the way that he's developed and emerged as we've been heading into conference play here, it's very encouraging to have a guy like that. But yeah, we'll have more to talk about when it comes to Kentucky when we get into the weekend preview and Tennessee as well. But what a game. I mean, both sides, quality basketball went down to the wire. Tennessee's got a lot of offensive issues to get cleaned up, but hopefully they can because if they can unlock that full potential, they'll be right there with some of the best teams in the country. And Kentucky, they just got to keep humming the way they are, and they'll be right there as well.